Hey, folks. Sam Seder here. Just a reminder, the AM Quickie has now moved to its own feed. You can go through Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, Google Podcasts, or you can go to amquickie.com to sign up for it. Do it now. You get the headlines in less than 5 minutes. Okay, start this other show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, October 7th, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Ian Haney López, the Chief Justice Earl Warren Professor of Public Law at the University of California, Berkeley, on Merge Left, fusing race and class, winning elections, and saving America. Also on the program today, there's a second Ukrainian call whistleblower, this one with direct knowledge of that call, as if we needed it. It's all there. That indictment is sewn up as far as I'm concerned. Meanwhile, Trump invites Turkey to kill millions of our Kurdish allies in Syria. Federal judge orders Trump's taxes handed over to the Manhattan DA. Trump people have appealed. We'll find out soon. Oops, Rick Perry as the fall guy. Turns out Trump donors were running a parallel shakedown in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Trump will deny immigrant visas unless they can prove they have health insurance. White House is subpoenaed. Mick Mulvaney gets an offer he will but shouldn't refuse. 6,000 injured, over 100 dead as Iraqi security forces shoot protesters. Bernie Sanders releases a campaign finance reform plan that at the very least calls for no corporate donations to that 2020 convention. And Socialist tops the polls in Portugal, will form a left alliance government. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Brendan on the board today. Exceptional job on the music, the fade in, fade out, whatever it was.
I've learned so much from Matt Leck over these few years.
Honestly, today was exceptional. Well done. We've got a lot of news. We're going to dedicate tomorrow's show to that news. And I was hoping also to talk about the Supreme Court. We're going to have to probably put that on hold and maybe talk about that in the coming days. Everything's getting jammed up for me because of the Jewish holidays. And then next week we have the Democratic debate and Columbus Day. And then the following week I will be going to Las Vegas for the tort lawyer conference. So, but we will endeavor to get you as much as possible. I mentioned at the beginning, at the top of the show, the AM Quickie. It's a good way of just getting a rundown of some of these top stories that we don't necessarily have time to get into, but you should be aware at least because these will be ongoing narratives in a lot of instances. The impeachment stuff, I mean, like I said, we could impeach right now. There's no doubt in my mind that there is sufficient evidence for, I think, multiple articles of impeachment. But why stop now? Because I mean, if this is the way he ran the relationship with Ukraine just to get dirt on Hunter Biden and to prove this wild conspiracy theory from 2016, what about when we're talking about like him filling bags of money? Like, I mean, does anyone have any sort of sense of like, oh, the reason why Donald Trump is essentially selling out the Kurds, not essentially, is selling out the Kurds. And remember how hurt he was about the kids? When he was the kids, when he thought about, like, we're not going to bomb Iran because of the kids. Like, I realized, like, there might be a kid who died. Does anyone think that he is selling out the Kurds this way because of some ideological or geopolitical notions that he's been harboring for a long time? I mean, it's not as if there are entities in the Republican Party who are necessarily all excited about this. He's opening the door to full ethnic cleansing, and you have to ask yourself why. I mean, Lindsey Graham, he's running around. His hair is on fire. He can't believe this from Donald Trump. Who could have imagined? But he's even lost Brian Kilmeade on Fox and Friends. Now, there are times where people, even like Brian Kilmeade, can be correct about things. Maybe not necessarily for the same reasons as we may have, maybe sometimes for the same reasons, but it can happen. But if anybody thinks that Donald Trump is doing this because he thinks his base is like, when are we going to let Turkey go in there and roust the Kurds? Or if he's had, from his days back in, dabbling with, foreign policy people, like some notion about the balance of power in that region is really fundamentally rests in Turkey's ability to undercut any type of threat from the Kurds. I mean, he's getting something from someone or some entity, or maybe multiple ones.
Yeah, he wants to open a Trump Tower in Istanbul.
I mean, it could be that. It could be that straightforward, or it could be some other bank shot.
There were arms deals on the line.
I mean, who knows? But an impeachment not only allows you to impeach him for the things that we already know about, it gives you the ability to say to anybody who's going to withhold documents from you that that act in and of itself can be construed as obstruction and an article of impeachment, which makes it a lot harder for people to hold back information. And so you use this power to dig up the other rot that exists there. In the meantime, I mentioned Brian Kilmeade can sometimes be right. Here he is. But it's one of those horrible, awkward situations where apparently Steve Doocy showed up late for work and just rushed in and did not get the talking points of the day. So he's very confused.
Just what a disaster. I mean, the president's statement through Stephanie Grisham is, we defeated the caliphate. The caliphate's destroyed. We would not have done that without the Kurds, who did all of our fighting. While our guys, the reason why our casualties were so low is because Kurds did all the fighting.
Pause it. Now, you remember over the past couple of years where Brian Kilmeade would always give credit as he was talking about Donald Trump getting rid of ISIS, where he would say it was the Kurds, right? You all remember that. But if you've forgotten, I understand, because it never happened. But here we go.
Of our fighting, while our guys, the reason why our casualties were so low is because Kurds did all the fighting. Now we're saying, okay, Turks, go wipe them out or force them out. What kind of message is that to the next ally that wants to side with us? Meanwhile, we're taking Sunni prisoners and giving them to Sunni Turkey, who has been nothing but irresponsible, though technically a NATO ally. A disastrous series of events. I hope the president will rethink this.
I think the president's doing exactly what he wants to, because he has made from the get-go very clear
to release ISIS fighters.
Campaign promise to end wars in other countries.
And abandon our allies? That's a campaign promise? Well, abandon the people that got the caliphate destroyed?
I think when people find out that somebody else is willing to take over the fight against ISIS, they're going to be okay with it.
Who's taking it?
Well,
Turkey's not going to fight ISIS.
We have given Turkey permission to do that and the quote was, Turkey will now be responsible for all ISIS fighters.
And kill and wipe out the Kurds? Are you kidding me? Again, we're abandoning our most loyal allies who did all our fighters. All we did is arm them, and they did all the work. And now we say, good luck surviving.
Well, it looks like that's the tack the White House and the president's going to take. We're going to have more reports from Washington, D.C. What do you think about this? The fact that it looks like we're going to pull out and Turkey's going to take over. Email us, friends at foxnews.com.
And abandon.
Okay, let's talk about impeachment.
Wow. They're going to have the things at the commissary at Fox are going to be a little bit uncomfortable today.
What the hell is going on over there?
Well, no, I mean, Kilmeade, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, he's, first of all, you have to feel for Brian Kilmeade because he's watched two Republican presidents do the exact same thing to the Kurds multiple times, starting with George H.W. Walker, H.W. Bush, back in 1993, where he basically called for the Kurds to rise up in northern Iraq. And after, in the sort of the wake of our invasion of Iraq, part one, based upon a series of lies that were perpetrated by some spokespeople talking about Kuwaiti babies, et cetera, called for the Kurds to rise up in northern Iraq. And then when they did, was like, actually, I'm sorry, I didn't realize what time it was. We've got to go. And caused a massive slaughter of Kurds in Iraq. And now we're doing it again with people who even Brian Kilmeade concedes have been fighting against ISIS, basically Donald Trump's greatest victory, and he has sold them out. The question is, why? In fact, not only does the statement not even say that the Turks, that Turkey is going to be fighting ISIS, all they're going to do is get a hold of the ISIS prisoners that we have captured. And in that statement that they referenced, President Trump spoke with President Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey by telephone. Turkey will soon be moving forward with its long-planned operation into northern Syria. The United States Armed Forces will not support or be involved in the operation. That's very nice of us. The United States forces, having defeated the ISIS territorial caliphate, will no longer be in the immediate area. But we haven't really been there anyways. So it's not like any type of, we're not pulling back our troops.
It's like
we're just basically pulling back our promise to the Kurds. We're basically just pulling back our diplomatic powers and saying, okay, fine, head in. The United States government has pressed France, Germany, and other European nations from which many captured ISIS fighters came to take them back, but they did not want them and refused. I'm quite convinced Donald Trump wrote that sentence. Maybe he dictated it.
Yeah, it almost reads like a tweet of his.
The United States will not hold them for what could be many years at great cost to the United States taxpayer. Turkey will now be responsible for all ISIS fighters in the area captured over the past 2 years in the wake of the defeat of the territorial caliphate by the United States. I mean, maybe this is just the deal. Like, it's worth it. We're going to allow for the ethnic cleansing that will take place. The undoubtedly tens of thousands of Kurds who will be killed in that region, maybe more, maybe a little bit less, who will be killed in that region so that we don't have to deal with the prisoners that we supposedly have in our custody. And I don't even know what that number is. But I want to say it's unbelievable, but it's totally believable. We'll talk more about that later in the program.
I can't wait to see the pretty face that Jimmy Dore tries to put on this one.
I mean, I will say this. And, granted, Hillary Clinton would have already had us in World War III by this point, and we would all be dead. But this is not something that Hillary Clinton would have done. I mean, assuming that she wasn't overtaken by Parkinson's. Hey, are you trying to drink more water? Liquid IV hydrates you 2 to 3 times faster and more efficiently than water alone with the added bonus of vitamin C, B3, B5, B6, B12. I will tell you this right now. I will cop to it. Saturday night, I didn't eat very long. I had a couple more, too many drinks. I did not drink any water before I went to bed. Next morning, the first thing I do, a liquid IV. It hydrates you faster than water does, just water alone. Replenishes you, makes you feel better. I use it when I travel quite a bit. I use it when I exercise, a little bit before, a little bit after. Get those vitamins in my muscles. And everybody loves around here. And also when I'm sick.
Had one this weekend before the wedding I went to.
Boom. Fastest growing wellness brand in the country. Their products are non-GMO, vegan, free of gluten, free of dairy, free of soy, and you can find it everywhere. They have Liquid IV at Costco, folks. It's a great healthy alternative to traditional sugary sports drinks. It's perfect for fueling through workouts, preventing muscle fatigue, and promoting healthy post-workout recovery. And this is what's really great about it. It comes in these small packets, powdered packets. TSA friendly. You can travel with them. You can have them on the plane. You can have them when you land. You don't have to worry about finding, I don't know, the junk they sell at some Piggly Wiggly somewhere. I love Liquid IV. I know you will too. Right now, my listeners get 25% off at liquidiv.com when you use my code MAJORITY at checkout. 25% off anything you order at Liquid IV's website. Go to liquidiv.com, enter my code, promo code MAJORITY, get your savings, start getting better hydration. That's Liquid IV, 2 letters, IV.com, promo code majority. Don't wait. Start properly hydrating today. And also, folks, Babbel will get you speaking a new language quickly and with confidence. I feel like everybody in this office is about to do this. Maybe we should have a competition.
I forfeit.
Is competition going to start kicking in?
I would kick in some competition. I want to start
Jamie's
learning.
got a head start on all of us.
I want to learn Portuguese. Well, maybe Jamie could pick up a second language.
We all have to do a different language.
Yes.
Well, I want to do Spanish too, but you can choose from 14 different languages. Spanish, French, Italian are in there. Portuguese is one of them too, if I remember correctly. Russian.
I'm going to take Portuguese.
Yeah, let's have a Spanish off.
Let's do it. Babbel's teaching method, speech recognition technology, has been proven to be effective across multiple studies. And the thing about Babbel that is different from a lot of these types of apps and whatnot is that their lessons are created by over 100 language experts. In other words, real human beings who understand how you learn a language and understand nuances in words, not by some type of translation machine. The lessons are engaging and they're super convenient. They last only 10, 15 minutes. You can do it, I don't know, on your way walking to the supermarket or driving to the supermarket or walking through the supermarket. Babbel is available as an app or online. Your progress syncs across all your devices. I think we're going to do this. Maybe we should do this. I think we should have a Babbel language off. That sounds a little bit
let's definitely do Spanish.
Because you listen to the show, Babbel has a very special offer for you. You go to Babbel.com, select the language of your choice. Once you try for free and are ready to sign up, select the 3-month option, and Babbel will give you 3 additional months for free with promo code MAJORITY. That's 6 months for the cost of 3 with the promo code MAJORITY. Go to Babbel, BABBEL.com, enter promo code MAJORITY. Babbel, speak a new language with confidence. And lastly, as you know, hiring can be a slow process. And apparently there's this story about this guy, Dylan Miskowitz. You heard about him? Altura's COO needed to hire a director of coffee for his organic coffee company. He was having trouble finding qualified applicants. Hello, ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them for you. Its technology identifies people with the right experience, invites them to apply to your job. So, for instance, let's say I'm looking for a producer, and it goes out there. I got a ton of super qualified candidates. I could have hired someone literally in the first couple of days. I waited a week. I got a ton more. And then Brendan showed up. And that's how we hired Brendan, through ZipRecruiter. That guy Dylan, he posted his job on ZipRecruiter.
Him a rose.
He said he was impressed by how quickly great candidates apply. That was my experience too. He used ZipRecruiter's candidate rating feature to filter his applicants so he could focus on the most relevant ones. If I had to organize the whole thing myself, it would have been a disaster. That's how Dylan found his new director of coffee in just a few days, and that's how I found Brendan. With results like that, it's no wonder 4 out of 5 employees who post to ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. See why ZipRecruiter is effective for businesses of all sizes. Mine was tiny. Now Brendan has grown it huge.
Competition would start kicking in.
Try ZipRecruiter for free. Our web address, ZipRecruiter.com/majority. That's ZipRecruiter.com/majority. ZipRecruiter.com/majority. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. All right, we're going to take a quick break.
Trump is already threatening Turkey.
What?
29 minutes ago.
He's threatening Turkey?
34 minutes ago, Trump says he will obliterate Turkey's economy if it acts, quote, off limits in Syria.
So you could go in there, but you got to pretend like you're not doing anything.
And the Pentagon has issued its own statement saying it would be destabilizing if Turkey did this. And this is one of those things where I know we have to get to our esteemed guest, but there's like a bigger problem with the sort of chain of command and bigger democracy questions. But this is also, he's so flagrant and ridiculous that other parts of the bureaucracy are kicking in.
It's also a little worrisome. I read, and we will get to, we'll call Ian in just a second, but I read a theory as to why Mattis will not be more critical of Trump is because there's a concern in the military that there's a lot of Trump supporters, which is really terrifying. So in instances like this, where you see the Pentagon brass having to stand up and perhaps push back on certain ideas, the thing that you don't see, in addition to it being problematic, like he is the commander-in-chief.
Right.
Sorry, America, you voted for him. The other problem is not only from the standpoint of like, I don't think I want to set the precedent where the military gets to tell the president what to do.
Right.
Because I don't want them telling Bernie Sanders like, hey, no, we're going in. Sorry, Chief.
We don't want them staging a coup on Bernie Sanders either.
But the thing that's also happening simultaneously here that we probably cannot see is that it is weakening the relationship or the command structure in the military, or has the potential to. So happy Monday, and we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Ian Haney López on Merge Less, fusing race and class, winning elections, and saving America. Let's hope. We'll be right back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program the Chief Justice Earl Warren Professor of Public Law at the University of California, Berkeley, author of Merge Left, Fusing Race and Class, Winning Elections, and Saving America, Ian Haney López. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you. I'm delighted to join you.
So you were on this show, I guess maybe it was 2015, maybe it was 2014, talking about your book at the time, Dog Whistle Politics. And this book sort of came out of that one. Is that right?
Very much so. So Dog Whistle Politics was my effort to understand and explain the way in which political parties have become polarized around racial issues, that there is a strategy adopted by the Republicans as a strategy. I want to make it very clear, as a strategy, not as bigotry, but as a strategy.
Ian, I'm sorry. Votes. Ian, I'm sorry. Can we? I apologize. Can we call you back? We seem to have a poor connection.
Sure, no problem at all. Please do.
Okay. Bear with us, folks. We're going to call him right back. No, keep it up.
Trying this again. How about now?
I think it's better. I think it's a little bit better. I was just getting a poor connection signal, and you were cutting in and out. So, all right. So let's take that that again. This book follows your Dog Whistle Politics, and tell us how that happened.
Sure.
I'm sorry. You know what? We're getting a poor connection again. We can't even hear you. I'm going to try your other number, if you can hear us. Okay. All right, folks, bear with us. We're going to try and call him. Let's just put up some a little bit of music. We got to. Here, I'll do this music.
This is Ian.
Oh, okay. All right, we're back. Hi.
I think there's a conspiracy of some sort.
Well, no, actually, this sounds much better. So we have defeated the conspiracy. Good. All right, so let's try this again. This book came out of Dog Whistle Politics. I mean, maybe. Well, tell us how, and maybe also what it requires is just a reminder of what you were talking about in the context of Dog Whistle Politics.
So the book Dog Whistle Politics is about the use of coded racial appeals in American politics, things like illegal aliens, silent majority, thugs, gangbangers, silent majority, American heartland, all of these terms that on the one hand trigger racist stereotypes and on the other hand allow politicians to deny that they had any intention to do that at all. That was a book in 2014 that really said, hey, this has been happening for 50 years. And then Donald Trump effectively reads my book of critique as somehow a how-to manual, gets himself elected precisely by using Dog Whistle Politics. So it was a moment for me of recognizing we need to go beyond simply analyzing what they're doing, and we really need to figure out how to fight back against dog whistling. And I knew by then that Republicans, in order to hone these racially divisive but superficially colorblind messages, that they used focus groups, they used poll testing, they used communications experts. So I resolved to do the same thing. I connected up with a great communication specialist. We hired some fabulous pollsters. We ran a 2-year research project, and the aim was to say, how do we explain to the American voter that racism is being used as a divide and conquer weapon, and that when we come together, that's when we can all win.
Okay, so you basically adopted, I guess, the sort of the methodology of the right on some level to fashion a message that both included race and class in some respects, right? On the right, I mean, they're not ignoring class; they're just fusing race and class in some way that I guess triggers, for lack of a better word, their voters. And if you could too, just if you're speaking on a headset, just keep it in the headset in one location.
Great. So I think that's right. I think it's very important to understand that on the right, there's a consistent story about race, government, and class. And the story that the right is always telling, and I want to be clear, this is an underlying story. This is like the skeleton of the messages they communicate. They will almost never say it in precisely these terms, but you'll recognize it. They'll say, listen, you ought to worry about lazy people. You ought to worry about dangerous criminal people. You ought to worry about violent people. And underneath that is, you ought to worry about people of color. And then they segue to a second part, which is to say, and you can't trust government because government is actually coddling these undeserving people with welfare. Government is throwing open the borders. Government is refusing to control these lawless criminals. And so, this is the third point, you ought to trust yourself to the marketplace. It's really the market that's your salvation. And now, if you kind of back up from that, and this is a story of welfare queens, this is a story of undocumented immigrants going on welfare or getting hospital services. This is the claim that we need businessmen to run the country like a business because the market produces fair outcomes. This is the idea that the market produces fair outcomes is a highly racialized story. It says brown and black people are poor because they deserve to be poor. There's something fundamentally wrong with them, and the market recognizes that. And in turn, it says anybody who works hard and is a decent, honest person, the sort of stereotype of what it means to be white, those people will succeed. Now, of course, a lot of people don't succeed in the marketplace, and this creates a lot of bitterness, a lot of confusion, a lot of resentment, and so you get this wild phenomena where people are struggling in the marketplace because the jobs aren't there, the economy shifted, the pensions have gone away, but they hate government and they hate welfare, they hate the Affordable Care Act, the very sorts of programs that would help them in an economy that's not working for regular folks. But they hate it because they're steeped in this story that says those are handouts to undeserving people of color.
You know, it's fascinating. There's there's two things that strike me. One is that the relationship in that story between government and the free market. I'm not equating these two, but structurally it seems similar to me. Is sort of the way that white supremacists use Jews to explain why black people may have achieved more than they have in certain instances. Like there's an interloper in this equation, and that in the context that you're talking about, it's government, and it's government is what is tipping the scales and why they're suffering on some level, because it is allowing the undeserving to achieve when a marketplace, a free market, would just make sure that everything was right. The other thing that strikes me is a piece I read by Monica Potts in the New York Times just yesterday, I think, about Arkansas. And the title of it escapes me at the moment, but it very much talks about this dynamic where you have people who could be helped by government, and they do not even want this help from government. It's in the land of self-defeat. They're suspicious of people who want to come and do material benefits for them because they just have that much distrust of government, broadly speaking. Not that they won't deliver it, but that they will deliver it.
Yes, no, I think that's exactly right. And what we need to do is we need to back up and take a historical perspective. We need to understand that 100 years ago, in the age of the robber barons and the big industry and factories, the titans of the economy were telling people, "You're on your own. you don't need unions, you don't need government. The real man provides for himself and negotiates his own contracts. And of course, it was all BS. You can't stand up to the power of money without organizing people. That's just the fundamental fact of social life. Then you get the Depression, and you see, large swaths of the society out of work, losing their homes, farm values plummeting, and people turn around and say, this is not my poverty, the fact that I'm hungry, the fact that I can't take care of my kids. It's not because I'm not trying hard. It's not a matter of individual fault. This is the way the economy has been structured and what the government's doing. And so for the next 30 or 40 years, we have this long New Deal in which people say, on my own, you're kidding me. The forces arrayed against me are too big. I'm actually connected with everybody else, and we want to make sure government works for us. That was the dominant ethos of the New Deal. That was the dominant ethos among whites. So the really important question is, what produced the sort of ethos that Potts was reporting on in that essay you're talking about, In the Land of Self-Deceit? What produced this new ethos which said, I can't trust government, government's against me, I really am on my own? And one of the things that she said in her article is so interesting is people are moving towards this extreme social isolation, this extreme individualism. They're not helping their neighbors. They fear and distrust their neighbors. They don't want anybody around them, right? What produced that shift? Because it is a big shift. There's nothing natural about it. It wasn't there. It's diametrically opposed to the dominant consensus among whites for 40 years. The consensus, by the way, that built the largest expansion of the middle class in the history of the world. And that's where we come back to the role of dog whistle politics. The titans of industry, the new version, the Goldwaters, and then the Ronald Reagans and General Electric and the Heritage of the Koch brothers, they funded a story that said, we're not all in this together because some people are violent and some people are undeserving. And government, it's on the side of those violent, undeserving people, not you. Fear people of color, but hate government. And here, just to pick up on a point you were making, it's not just that government is the interloper. Government is the main enemy in the narrative of the right. Government is the main enemy. And what happens when most people think government's the main enemy? It makes it much easier for the few and the wealthy to hijack government for their own purposes.
So I want to pivot to the work that you did in terms of like finding a message that would compete with this one, but to what extent, and this certainly comes through in that essay, because it's about Van Buren County in Arkansas, and to what extent are we talking about? I mean, I think it's quite clear the messaging that has gone on. But I wonder if there was certain segment of the population that was more susceptible to this message at that time in the 80s. And, these people are, I think, even more beleaguered, certainly, than they were in the early 80s. I mean, there's a whole host of different things that have contributed to that. But one of the things that has contributed to it, and also I think, and I wonder from your perspective, if it's the case that it also set the context for people to be more receptive to that message. You're on your own, individualism. There are forces out there that want to take stuff from you. That government is giving them largesse and whatnot. Is the rural-urban divide that the nature of the people who stay in a small town, I'm not saying all of them, but the nature and the desires and the ambitions or the perspectives of people who stay in a small town in rural America versus those people from that town who say, like, I want to go to the city for whatever reason that they want to go to the city, has sort of sorted people in such a way that the people who remain in those rural areas are much more susceptible to this message, because also the people who would not be susceptible to that message have moved out already. And so there's no competing narrative that exists in these rural areas.
I think that that's a dynamic. But I also think that we that we can mislead ourselves if we emphasize dispositional elements or temperamental differences. And so there is this dynamic in which you have commentators on the left who purport to explain, different sorts of brains, different ways we're wired, different fears, or fear versus curiosity. Okay, I think that there's some role for that. But another way to think about this is the sorts of fears and the sorts of antisocial isolationism and alienation that is now dominant among Republican voters. That used to be associated with the John Birch Society and, 5, 6, 8% of the population, the most extreme, the most paranoid. If you wanted to explain Birchers, I'd say, okay, if we're talking 5 or 6 or 8% of the population, let's look at psychological factors. What is going on with these folks? But when you want to explain half the population, and you want to explain a shift that occurred relatively rapidly, that is, mid-1960s, landslide election for Lyndon Johnson when he promises a war on poverty, 1972 landslide election for Richard Nixon when he promises to turn back the Democratic tide and protect the silent majority. That's not psychological factors. That's not temperamental differences. That's a major shift in the cultural and political story that people are telling themselves. And so while I think that these dispositional elements are there, I want us to focus on the way in which a story of racial conflict, government betrayal, and a dependence on market actors, that is purposefully produced with the implication that it can be purposefully defeated.
Okay, interesting. And so, and I guess I should just say, though, that I'm not necessarily talking even necessarily about these predispositions as much as I'm talking about the sort of the fact of the matter is, if you live in a rural area, and even it doesn't even necessarily have to be a rural area. I grew up in a city that I think was extremely suspicious of outsiders. The second biggest city in New England, but extremely suspicious of outsiders and outside elements and et cetera, et cetera. And I've lived in small rural areas, and that is a very prominent sense. And I don't know that it's psychological as much as your context of where you live in. You're just not exposed to certain things. And go ahead.
The key to me there is segregation, the physical, spatial, social segregation. What we see in our research is that the people who are most racially fearful live in the areas in which there are the fewest people of color. When people are socially isolated from others, it becomes much easier for them to be fearful of these others, for them to understand and view others almost exclusively through racist stereotypes. It's when you get to know people and you get to appreciate that cultural differences, linguistic differences, differences in skin color or in religion don't make people fundamentally scary or threatening. That's when you can actually immunize people against political stories that say, don't worry about the rich and powerful, worry about people who don't quite look like you.
Okay, so let's talk about how one does that to a certain extent. So when you set out, and I know you did this in conjunction with some folks from Demos, set out to sort of determine what kind of narrative you can that cuts through this this now predisposition that significant portion of our country, 45% maybe, have in terms of this story they tell themselves. Give us some examples of how you developed that. I mean, I know Indiana, there was a you did a poll in Indiana. Maybe let's start there. Just in terms
we need to depress your audience just a little further before we. There is.
Oh, my audience is depressed. But yes, go ahead.
We got to depress them a lot. So, yes, in one way we're talking about Trump voters, but when we set out to figure out how powerful these messages were, the first thing we did was we tested essentially the sort of racialized rhetoric that Trump uses. And what we found is if you have a message about people from terrorist countries who wish us harm, or people from countries who've entered illegally and don't respect our laws, the sort of things that we understand as racist dog whistles. When we tested that message, we found that that message was convincing to the majority of Republicans and the majority of Democrats and the majority of African Americans and the majority of Latinos. That is, once you take the highly racialized narrative that the right is telling and you switch it into code so that you're not using expressly racial terms, that story of threat from brown and black people is actually convincing to a wide swath of Americans, the majority of Republicans, Dems, African Americans, Latinos. There's a lot of power there. So part of what we're doing is this isn't a project just to say, okay, how do we win over Republican voters? This is a project that says, how do we bring over about 60% of the American public who fall into a persuadable category of both being susceptible to racial fear, but also being committed to positive visions of people of color and government. And just to be clear, the majority of African Americans and the majority of Latinos are in that persuadable middle.
Okay, and so I guess that's depressing in the sense that we're all susceptible to these narratives that I guess trigger some of our fears. And so what? So let's make that pivot. Where did you start in terms of language that or a narrative that that was effective with all of these folks?
What we started with was the insight that if we accuse Republicans or Donald Trump of being a racist, that deepens the divide because it strengthens the narrative that this is white people against people of color. If instead we start with the point that racism is being used as a divide and conquer weapon against all of us, that created room for inclusion. Now, it was very important to take the next step and not simply say they're trying to divide us, but to really affirmatively insist we want to come together. They're trying to divide us across race lines. We want to come together across race lines, white, brown, black, whatever color, whatever national origin. We want to come together because when we come together, that's when we can take this country back. That turned out to be that culmination of naming division, but explaining it as a weapon of corrupt billionaires against all of us, and then affirmatively saying, let's come together. When we come together across race lines, that's how we make this a country that works for all of us. That turned out to be a very, very powerful message. It beat the dog whistle racial fear message. It was also more powerful than standard Democratic messages that either called out the Republicans for being racist or tried to avoid talking about race altogether.
I mean, in some ways, wasn't that Obama's message? There's no red America. There's no blue America. And I don't know who the they is in this instance. I don't know that he was so explicit about billionaires and this and that. But there were times he would sort of hint at some type of populism. But wasn't that largely the message?
It was potentially his message. I think had he made it his message, we would have had a very different presidency and a very different slate of legislative accomplishments. Listen, so Obama comes in and he says, let's all come together, hope and change. But at the same time that he's doing that, he's suppressing two critical messages. One, that while we're all coming together, the reason we need to come together is because we're losing the class war, that there's a class war that's going on. It's been going on for 50 years, and we're losing. And if we don't come together, we can't fight back. And Obama simply was not interested in making that point. And the other thing about Obama is he said, let's all come together as a way to bury the race conversation as a way to sidestep it, to say, I'm not going to talk about it. And it's one of the strange marks of the Obama years that Obama talked about racial division in the United States less than any Democratic president since FDR. Obama did this sort of, we're all in this together, as a kind of a cliche. Let's hold hands where everything's fine. We're just going to march into a future, but I'm not going to tell you who the enemy is, and I'm not going to tell you what sorts of divisions are being used against us. It's all going to be good. That worked in 2008 in the depths of a recession, and given the sort of the calamity of the Bush administration. It worked less well in 2012. Obama's remarkable for having won re-election with less support than his initial election, and it simply failed for Hillary Clinton. People want a story that says we need to come together because there's a class war going on and they're using division against us. And we want to come together in a way that names racism expressly as a problem that we have to overcome, because we see that racism is tearing this country apart, and we want it named and we want to challenge it. We don't want to hide from it anymore. And those are the two crucial differences with Obama's message. Name class war and name racism as the weapon that's being used against all of us, and cross-racial solidarity as the route forward, not only for racial justice, but for economic fairness for everybody of every color.
It sees like the message has that the class war message is a non-passive voice one. In other words, we know who, we name who in this message, who's waging this class war, right? The billionaire class.
We have
I mean,
to.
I think other people would say maybe capitalists, but for the ease of understanding, and I guess I would imagine, for just like a colloquialism, is billionaires, wealthy,
Right.
greedy people. But what do we say about racism? I mean, how is it that the class war has a perpetrator, but racism doesn't? Or is that just a strategic?
Oh, racism? No, racism has a perpetrator. Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, all of the millionaires shilling for billionaires by stoking racist hatred in our country. And we should be clear. I mean, in the way that Elizabeth Warren says Fox News is hate for profit, the hate is especially racist hatred. They are stoking racist hatred for profit, right? And it's very important to name that as what's going on. There are prominent people who are making a mint by getting us to hate each other and to fight each other along race lines. While we're at it, we might throw Russia and Russia's bots into the mix. And it's, in one sense, it's kind of a joke, and in another sense, it's deadly serious. Russia understood that if it wanted to help Donald Trump win election in 2016, the way to do that was to stoke racial acrimony through social media in the United States. In fact, here's how I'd put this. It's one of the most important insights of this dog whistle politics story to recognize racism isn't something that just floats out there in the sort of this miasma or the culture, nor is racism just a vestige of hundreds of years of discrimination. Both of those are true, but those are insufficient ways of understanding racism. Racism is as powerful and as pervasive today because some of society's most powerful, most wealthy segments see a profit for themselves in funding it. And that sounds dramatic until you think, well, okay, Koch brothers, petrochemical industry, how do they protect their interests? How do they block us from enacting any environmental legislation? Partly they do it through the usual, hire a bunch of lobbyists. Partly they do it through peddling a bunch of fake science. But in the main, they do it by funding groups like the Tea Party, groups that organize people around stories of racist fear and resentment. Or the Mercers who make their fortune on Wall Street. What do they fund? Breitbart and Steve Bannon, who organize and rile up voters through racist stereotypes. We are living in a world now in which racism is the main weapon of economic titans against the rest of us.
And how receptive are those on the right to hearing Limbaugh's name or Hannity's name or Carlson's name? Because I would imagine that becomes, then they start to, they were like, wait a second. It's one thing, I don't like the Kochs. I don't know who they are. This guy Mercer, whoever, even Donald Trump. I think, we can argue that he's sometimes, I don't like him on Twitter. This is my conservative. I'm inhabiting a conservative now. But wait a second. Rush, I've been listening to for 20 years. Sean Hannity is my guy. Tucker Carlson, I don't like how he's a little uppity, but he's still pretty straight shooter. I mean, what happens when you introduce them as being the purveyors of this? How receptive are people? Or are we talking about people, there's a limited number of these people on the right who are receptive to this message, and we hit them?
So when we segmented the American electorate, we found that there was about 23% of the national electorate were consistently progressive. About 18% of the national electorate were consistently conservative, or I would say reactionary is a better term. We're not going to reach that 18%. But that left 59% who are toggling in between. And those are the people that we can reach with this message that says they're trying to divide us. Let's come together. Together we can make this the country we want. That same message also plays really well with the progressive base. And this is an important insight. We don't have to message separately to reach people who are in this persuadable voter segment or who are Democratic base voters. Likewise, we don't have to message separately to reach whites and people of color. This message of cross-racial solidarity was the most popular message with both whites and people of color. That's the strength of this approach. It is a unifying message, not only in its substance, hey, we need to come together, but it's a unifying message in the sense that it is the most popular message with all of the important segments of the Democratic base.
Well, before I get to that question, I just want to talk about that poll in Indiana and the polling that you did in Minnesota, because both those sort of stick out for me in terms of, sort of very definitional as to this era.
So what we wanted to do is we wanted to figure out how these sorts of messages would play in very different states. And the pattern was consistent, though we found that in swing states like Indiana, there was much greater polarization. You had people who were more consistently reactionary, people who were more consistently part of the progressive base. But even in a place like Indiana, we found a pattern in which a message of cross-racial solidarity worked. It was the strongest message, that a message of economic populism that tried to stay silent about race would work with the Democratic base, but would not work as well with persuadables, and that a message that really challenged racism, but in this sort of whites against non-whites sense of challenging racism, that was the message that performed the most poorly. Coming back to Minnesota, there was research that was done by a group, Faith in Minnesota, they were drawing on our research. They did their own independent canvassing project, and it was really stunning research. They started by showing people flyers that was essentially copied from a Republican flyer that was in actual distribution. And they asked people, do you agree or do you disagree? And they found very high levels of agreement with this Republican flyer, again, including, they did it with whites in rural Minnesota and people of color in urban Minnesota. Found very high levels of agreement. When they then came back to these same folks,
I'm sorry. Will
you
articulate what that flyer said?
The flyer was the typical dog whistle message that said, we need to keep our community safe. We need to protect our people first. My opponent wants sanctuary cities. Businessmen are what make this country great, right? That sort of, basically the Republican themes, a few of them centered on economics and trusting business, but most of them promoting a narrative of threatening and undeserving people, and implicitly people of color. That message was very popular.
Okay. And
when we came there.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So when we showed the same people a message that said, we all want something similar, but our opponents are trying to divide us. When they divide us, we all lose. When we come together, that's when we can get the things we need, like health care and good jobs and the sort of a beautiful Minnesota. Not only was that message popular across the board, it was actually a winning message among whites who initially agreed with the dog whistle racial fear message. And this is a very important point, because I think a lot of us have this sense that, hey, if anybody agrees with these racialized messages against immigrants and sanctuary cities and all of that, they're just racist, as if that's one thing and it explains their whole world outlook. And yes, there is a lot of susceptibility to racist stereotypes. But these same folks also can be pulled in a racially progressive direction if they understand how their racial ideals are the route forward for themselves and their families.
Interesting. Well, who do you perceive in our political world today who is delivering, or what people, I should say, are delivering something, if not this message, something close to this message? I mean, do you see is every Democratic candidate, let's put it this way, is every Democratic candidate similarly situated to deliver this message? Are there some that are already doing it? I mean, who out there is modeling this well and who's modeling it poorly?
It's a really great question. So I want to distinguish this message from something that is common among Democratic candidates. Many Democratic candidates say we need economic populism and we need racial justice. We should do both. But notice that they're essentially separate messages, and it's not clear why we should do both. And in some ways, these messages seem to be in tension, because when Democrats say they want to do racial justice, that sounds to a lot of people hear that through the Republican frame that says, see, Democrats only care about people of color. This message is a race fused to class message that says we want economic populism, and that means that we have to deal with racial division because that's what's stopping us. And we want racial justice, and that means we need to deal with a multiracial, we need to build a multiracial coalition for economic populism, because it's these dog whistle politicians who are at the root of some of the most severe violence against communities of color. That is, if you want racial justice, you need a multiracial coalition to defeat dog whistle politics. If you want economic populism, you need a multiracial coalition to defeat dog whistle politics. Whatever your agenda, these are fused. Now, from that point of view, who are can any Democratic candidate say this? You got to step back and say, what is their position on economic populism? Because the idea that there is a class war and that's why we need to come together, that's central to making sure that this new approach to unity really works. People need to understand what's in it for them, or alternately why they can expect others to join this coalition. So if you have candidates who want to shy away from the idea that the system is rigged, they're going to have a much harder time with this statement. Likewise, you need candidates who are comfortable talking about race. If you have candidates who don't have a good history of talking about race, don't get it, don't really understand it, to be perfectly frank, see racial justice as something they need to do for some particular constituents, but it's not their thing, they're going to have a hard time with this message. you read that the strongest candidates for this sort of approach are candidates who understand there's been a class war going on for 50 years. We need to rewrite the rules to help all of us. And all of us really means all of us. And that means things like racial justice and reparations. Those are essential to making us into the sort of society in which everybody has a decent chance to thrive. And now those candidates are in the best position to say, and these two goals are linked. Economic populism and a society in which people of every color have the best opportunity to thrive, those two are inseparably linked.
And so who do you see is doing that? To me, the sort of the most natural person who comes to mind when I think about that is AOC on some level. And then, just in terms of American politics, but maybe you have a different sense. But who?
No, I think that's right. I think that there are people like AOC, Elizabeth Warren, Reverend William Barber in terms of organizing a cross-racial movement in North Carolina, and now a sort of a rejuvenated poor people's movement across the country. There are folks who sometimes they get this exactly right. Sometimes they drift just a little bit. For someone like AOC, I would say a lot of the time she's really on this idea of intentional division and class war, and we need to come together. But sometimes she moves towards we need to denounce Trump for being a bigot or for being an anti-Semite side. And yes, I understand he is a bigot. Yes, I understand he's an anti-Semite. But I also understand labeling him that actually helps him. Because what it does is it deepens his story that this is fundamentally a racial conflict between warring racial groups, and implicitly he represents white folks.
That's sort of try not to think of an elephant type of theory, right? Like as soon as you name that dynamic, it immediately redounds to his story.
It confirms his story. It confirms his story because again, remember. The vast majority of people do not hear what Trump is saying as racist. When he says we need to shut the border against people who come from terrorist countries who mean us harm, there is a set of us who are like, that's racist. That's not the vast majority of Americans. Vast majority of Americans say, oh, yeah, we need to protect ourselves. So when the left turns around and says, hey, Trump, you're a bigot for saying that, most people say to themselves, well, I believe that. Am I a bigot? Are you calling me a bigot? And right there, that's when progressives lose. It's much more effective to stay consistent and to say Trump's a racist in the sense that he's a strategic racist. He's a carnival barker. He's running a con, and racism's his con. I want to be crystal clear. I am not saying don't call Trump a racist. Call him a racist. But make sure you're clear about what kind of racist he is.
Right.
You're saying strategic racist.
You're saying make sure that the critique is that he's using racism as a tool and labeling him as secondary, as long as racism is being centered as a tool that is creating a class division, and he's doing this on the behest or in service of those who control the economy.
I think that's right. So in fact, that's exactly right. Make it clear that racism is a weapon against all of us. Now, it's also important to make it clear that we're not all getting hurt the same, that when racism is used as a way to win elections, you end up with government that specifically targets communities of color, mass incarceration, mass deportation, mass surveillance, systemic neglect. That's what you get when the country elects politicians who campaign on the basis of racist messages. So we're not getting hurt the same way, but we are all getting hurt. And because we're all getting hurt, it does create the possibility of a cross-racial movement to drive out of politics these politicians who keep winning by dividing us.
You didn't mention Bernie Sanders there. Where do you think? Do you think that he's not delivering that type of message about racism as a mechanism to fuel a class war?
I think that he sometimes does that, and so sometimes Bernie will say Trump is using racism to scapegoat people, and I think that that's exactly right when he says that. But very often he defaults to a worldview that says economic inequality is the fundamental problem, and then he'll say, and so you can see that when people are suffering, politicians will scapegoat. And you start to see the way in which the race part is secondary to the story he's telling. And it becomes even more secondary when he says, let's deal with economic inequality first. That will disproportionately help people of color because they're disproportionately poor. So my economic populism is really racial justice, right? This is the answer he gives in terms of reparations. He says, well, I don't support reparations, but if we do all of the things that I say we should do in terms of economic populism, that's going to help lots of people of color. And again, you get this sense from Bernie's like racism second. And the mistake is to not recognize that economic inequality in the United States of the sort we're living in 2019 is directly a result of the power of racial division. And that racial division began to divide folks, break the New Deal coalition, and create popular support for rule by the rich when people were doing fine. It wasn't economic calamity that led to scapegoating, that led to people to look around for someone to blame. It was Republican politicians in the 1960s when most whites were doing great, having come off of the long New Deal, led them when they're doing fine to say,
so racism,
we're worried that government is favoring these other undeserving people.
So racism is the sword wielded by the billionaires, not the shield, when there's some type of response to what you've done to us.
I like the metaphor. I would just say it's both, right? It's both shield and sword. Right. It becomes a really powerful feedback loop. They use it as a sword to divide us. Economic hardship ensues. People look around for someone to blame, and then they use it as a shield. They don't blame us. You should blame those poor people, those poor brown and black people. It becomes this feedback loop, and the only way out of it is really to say, this is being used against all of us. People power is the only response to the power of big money.
Ian Haney López, the book is Merge Left, Fusing Race and Class, Winning Elections and Saving America. Folks, we will put a link to this book on majority.fm. It has all the, obviously, the data and the to sort of back up what we've been talking about here. Ian, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a great conversation.
Bye-bye. All right, folks. Interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff.
You know, the first miscegenation laws in the U.S. were created as a response to Bacon's Rebellion, wherein poor white indentured servants and black slaves rose up against the governor together, and it scared the shit out of the ruling class.
There you go.
Racism is a bourgeois ideology designed to divide the working class.
There you go. I was going to say, like, this is Jamie's... He won't say capital. He'll say billionaires, but it's the same thing. I mean, one is a little bit less theoretical, one's a little bit more colloquial.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I would only add that in addition to elections, we need to unite across racial lines to organize for worker power, working class power, and all the power that we need to take back the world.
I wonder if they have specific numbers on reparations in the polling.
Check that.
Because that's an interesting fusion he's going there. Because, I mean, it's a fascinating argument. But then, I mean, I've certainly never seen, I'm talking just on an objective level, any type of broad-based support for reparations in any type of polling anywhere. So that's a kind of interesting fusion of sort of emphasizing a mass message and then talking about that policy specifically, which I always do just like to say every time somebody brings it up, Marianne Williamson is the only reparations candidate. I think we should keep that on doc.
You know,
She's still in the race?
I think she hasn't dropped out.
I got a text message from her team that there's a fundraiser in Brooklyn, I think this weekend.
Oh, hell yeah.
Really?
Let's go.
How do you get all those text messages?
I don't know.
ZipRecruiter.
I just put my
Weird.
phone in on the internet on
There you go.
like, Applebee's gift cards and
All I get is the IRS fake calls.
You know, I've come
You still
around on
getting those?
reparations after reading some socialists on the fight for reparations and the connection between the fight for reparations and the fight against capitalism. Can't do reparations without coming after capitalism. So
There you go. Folks, you can support this program by going to jointhemajority.report.com. When you do, you support the free show that you just listened to. Not only that, we give you extra content that you could listen to going forward from this very moment. And getting back to the free show that you listen to, you get that commercial free. So join the Majority Report today by going to jointhemajority.report.com. Also, the AM Quickie, it's live on its own feed. Go to amquickie.com to sign up or just check your local podcast listings, as it were. You could join us in the fun half today. We have, bless his heart. I've been very difficult. I've been very hard on Scaramucci.
He's officially friend of show.
But apparently I know it looks like it, but I didn't say a word to this dude. He just stepped up and did one of those cameos.
He did the right thing.
Calling out Crowder. We will play that in the fun half. Also, we will talk more about what's happening with Donald Trump selling out the Kurds, although he seems to have backtracked. Apparently, he got a phone call from somebody. I mean, I don't even know what to say. We will talk about the revelations that there is a second whistleblower, to the extent that that's even relevant. We'll talk about the subpoena to the White House. We'll talk about Rick Perry. We're going to get more into this stuff tomorrow on the news, but we will check it all out. Also, don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code MAJORITY. Today is Monday. Tomorrow is Tuesday. Michael, I hope your voice is better.
Me too. I'll drink a lot of tea tonight. Tomorrow, we have Heidi Sloan, who's running for Congress, DSA in Texas. What does a socialist message for Texas mean and look like? And then I'm going to have a little bit of a debate, actually, with Sagar from Rising. He's Krystal Ball's co-host, or she's his co-host as well. And we're going to do a sort of socialism versus nationalism debate on how to address income inequality. So all that and much more, which hopefully I'll be able to elaborate tomorrow. And then grab your tickets to the Philly Live Show, November 23rd, with Emma Vigeland, Krystal Ball, Artesia Balthrop.
Jamie.
This week on the Antifada, we had on Nadia Guyot, an organizer from No New Jails NYC, to talk about No New Jails' fight to defeat Bill de Blasio's plan to close Rikers and replace it with all these borough-based justice hubs that are supposed to be more humane but are actually quite dystopian. And they're fighting this fight. It's really important right now for people to be aware of it and get involved. We also talked about prison abolition more generally as an idea and a framework for the work that we're doing in the present and beyond. We are also recording a new episode with Ross Wolf today on borders and economic nationalism, making the case for why we cannot solve the immigration problem within the bounds of social democracy in one country. Also, we have a live show coming up this weekend, Saturday, October 12th at Littlefield with the Antifada and Pod Damn America and all sorts of really good guests.
Oh, shit. This weekend?
Heck yeah. You want to come?
I
Put
mean,
you on the list.
if I'm in town, I definitely will. Matt is not here, but Literary Hangover lives on online at patreon.com/literaryhangover. This week, I can't remember what he's doing, but he'll tell you tomorrow. I mean, his stuff is evergreen. It's super evergreen.
Oh my God, and we released a new Vampire Castle where we talk about the Crow. I'm so sorry.
There you go. Folks, see you in the fun half.
Left is best.
Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2, 5 eighths, 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
You think I might be a Nazi?
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up.
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
yes. In fact, I'm with you right this moment. Ladies and gentlemen, the number is 646-257-3920. You can IM us at via the app at majorityapp.com. I got some good news about the app. I meant to talk about it in the first half of the program, but I did not. We're both the iOS and the Android apps are getting refreshes. So look for an update soon. And it's going to, all sorts of, well, I don't know if it's going to be, really great. But the AM Quickie will be on there.
There's a lot going on at in the MR universe right
Oh my
now.
gosh, so busy. Everything. So
expanding.
So busy. Expanding, getting bigger every day. New technologies. And I think if you have an Alexa or one of those things, ask it to play the AM Quickie and find out if it's in your news feed. I don't know. I tried to do it last night and to make I don't even know what they call it, a skill or something. And for all I know, I may have broken the whole system, taken it down from the inside, which I would be excited at that.
Taking down Bezos with your morning podcast.
If I would be equally happy if it played as a skill or just destroyed the entire platform.
Got a national.
One of those two things would be great. And if I could do all that with just the half an hour that it took me to noodle around that stuff, I had to do a special terms of service, like how much data we taking from people. And I just wanted to put isn't there a place I could just put 0? We're not taking any data. We're probably the only app that exists that doesn't have one of those PK kits or whatever it is that follow you around wherever you are. That's what all the apps are about, incidentally, folks. In fact, I don't have time to get into this today, but I probably will tomorrow. There is a report out from Scientific American. Where do I have that? I'll find. Oh, here it is. Scientific American. It's not. I don't think the report was from them. It was a preprint paper on rxiv.org by economist Keith Chen of University of California. And they matched up anonymous location data from 10 million smartphones to 93,000 polling places. And there's only 110,000 polling places in the country. Voters in predominantly black neighborhoods waited 29% longer on average than those in white neighborhoods to vote. 29% longer, a third longer. They were also about 74% more likely to wait for more than a half an hour. Now, there's two things that I take from the survey. One, our phones are a little bit terrifying. It's all anonymous. Doesn't have to be. That's the thing. I mean, if you're getting it anonymously, you could, but, and this data, so what happens with an app, and this is sort of a side note, because I think it's obviously the voter suppression is far more important in some respects, but people should be aware of this. There are things that they build apps and they put these little, they're like cookies or stuff that follow you when you browse online, but this is more, it follows you when you browse in the real world on these apps. You get a free app. That's what's going on there. Even paid apps, they put it in there because it's another source of revenue. We don't do this. If I knew how to do it, I probably would if I could sell a lot of money on it. But I got too many things to do right now than to dig into this and find out how to monetize it. But they follow you around and they'll sell this data to hedge funds that are, own like a supermarket chain. And where should we place a supermarket chain? We can tell that people are bouncing around. The highest foot traffic is around here, or this is where people are going at 3:00 in the afternoon, which we know from other data sets is the time of the grocery shopping. I don't know, stuff like this. This is a good use of that information to the extent if we're going to have it. Long lines are estimated to have deterred between 500 and 700,000 people from casting their ballot in 2012. These problems led to the creation of the Presidential Commission on Election Administration, which issued a 2014 report that set forth a standard no citizen should have to wait more than 30 minutes to vote. But that is should, because we have no federal right to vote in this country, because when we were in Reconstruction and we were trying to establish a federal right to vote, many of these states, we placated the southern states, and probably a certain amount of bigotry in the north as well, but particularly the southern states. There was, I think, 2 or 3 options on the table, as it were, as to what the 13th Amendment would be. And it ended up being just like, you cannot deny, basically former slaves from voting or anybody, et cetera. It was, as opposed to an affirmative right that cannot be in any way infringed upon. Like, you cannot have any other, it's one thing to say you can't deny someone to the right to vote because of their race. it's another to say you can't deny anybody the right to vote because of their race, and you cannot deny them a right to vote for any reason, period. And the exclusion of that latter point that I just said was why they were able to have from 1893, I think it is, maybe a little bit earlier, through to 1965, things like poll taxes or literacy tests to vote. Because they wanted to exclude black people from voting. They were willing to exclude poor white people in many respects too from voting. Very few people voted at that time anyways. And so we don't have no federal right to vote in this country. There are prohibitions about what can prevent you from voting. But we don't have the affirmative federal right to vote. And so we know from this data that if you are African American, you are far more likely to have obstacles to voting. And this is just wait times at voting places. I think if they also, you cross-reference this with a study that shows what polling places have been closed over the course of whenever a Republican gets in charge of the Secretary of State position, you will find the vast majority of those are in African-American neighborhoods, Latino neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods. So this is just one tool in which the Republican Party exerts its dominance. And I think the Democrats have not been sufficient on this, but that is because of their allergy to power. I think they're aware that they want more black participation in voting, not less, because Donald Trump is polling at 2% with black people, and I think Bush really was pushing the envelope. I think he got to maybe 10%. But that's that story there. So in other words, we're redoing our app. So let's just do the series of, here's Donald Trump last Thursday calling for an investigation into the Bidens in Ukraine and China. We said at the time why he was doing this. I still think it stands that he was doing this call specifically to normalize essentially what was criminal activity. Now, I've seen some takes on Twitter. Maybe we'll get to this when we get to the Ron Johnson thing. So let's hear this call, because we have the real issue here now is the Republican Party. This party I don't want to call them cowards because I think that gives them too much credit. I honestly do. They're corrupt AF, as the kids would say.
Not necessarily the kids, but...
And the adults.
We have tremendous power. What exactly did you hope Zelensky would do about the Biden after your phone call? Exactly. Well, I would think that if they were honest about it, they'd start a major investigation into the Bidens. It's a very simple answer. They should investigate the Bidens, because how does a company that's newly formed, and all these companies, if you look at, and by the way, likewise, China should start an investigation into the Bidens, because what happened in China is just about as bad as what happened with Ukraine. So I would say that President Zelensky, if it were me, I would recommend that they start an investigation into the Bidens. Because
Okay, now isn't that funny? Isn't that hilarious joke? Why do I say that's a hilarious joke? Because that's what Marco Rubio has told me. It was a joke, dude. Take a joke. Here is brave little Marco. Remember how tough he was when he was talking about his penis size with the president? Do you remember that? Do people remember that they got on an argument on a debate stage about their penis size. That's not a metaphor, folks.
I think I blocked that out.
Here he is now.
It was a highlight of the campaign.
Do you think it's okay for President Trump to ask China to launch an investigation of Joe Biden and Hunter Biden?
I don't know if that's a real request or him just needling the press, knowing that you guys were going to get outraged by it. He's pretty good at getting everybody fired up, and he's been doing that for a while. And the media responded right on task.
But you're one of the loudest critics of China and its human rights abuses. I mean, is it okay for him to ask to say that?
I don't think it's a real request. I think he did it to gig you guys. I think he did it to provoke you to ask me and others and get outraged by it. Like I said, I mean, he plays it like a violin and everybody falls right into it, but that's not a real request.
Yeah, you shouldn't take him serious. I don't take the president seriously when he says stuff. He was just digging with, why would we in any way get upset about what the president says? I mean, this is the most disingenuous, and like I say, cowardly is too kind of a word for this. This is corrupt. This is basically, I'll take the tax cuts, you take that thing. I'm going to cover for Donald Trump, me and my less than substantial endowment, apparently, says Marco Rubio. Before people try and cut that and attribute it to me.
No, he's a Kaufman-esque performance artist.
There it is, Marco Rubio. Little Marco. So cute. Sweating under the lights. Media played it because they wanted the press to come and ask Marco about it. Meanwhile, should we replay Jim Jordan on, or should we start with Stephanopoulos? Let's start with Stephanopoulos. Jim Jordan, the brave wrestling coach who ignored reports from his team that there was a doctor or physical therapist who was attempting and in some instances successfully sexually molesting them. Turns out there was something like 1,500? Was it 150? Many cases. Jim Jordan couldn't be bothered, but here he is on George Stephanopoulos' program, ABC This Week. This was this Sunday, I guess. I don't know why someone like that can continually get back invited onto, even though he won obviously a congressional seat. But here he is, Jim Jordan. And he's got a story to tell about Donald Trump's basically extorting Ukraine to get dirt on his opponent.
I still haven't gotten an answer to the question. Is it appropriate for the president to ask China to investigate Joe Biden?
I think he's got you guys all spun up, and obviously it's the case. You've asked me the question. You've asked me the question like 4 times. I've answered
because you haven't answered it.
I don't think he really meant go investigate. Do you think China's going to investigate him?
I don't know if China's going to investigate him. I know the president asked China to investigate.
We know they're not, George. Come on.
Why can't you answer yes or no? Do you think it's appropriate?
I don't, because I don't think that's what he did. I don't think that's what he did.
Pause it for 1 second. First of all, why do we assume that China wouldn't develop a storyline about anybody? Why do we assume that China, at this point, now that they've been invited to do so, didn't even need an invitation? Why wouldn't we think that certainly we would do this. Why would we think that they're not sitting around going like, it's in our best interest for Bernie Sanders to win, or it's in our best interest for Donald Trump to win, or Joe Walsh to do well in the Republican primary, or I want Amy Klobuchar. And so they just come up with a dossier of stuff that implicates whoever they perceive as being an opponent to any of those interests. I mean, why? The point isn't what we think China is going to do. The point is what the president did. I don't take the president seriously, George. But here, let's go.
But it was right there on camera.
I think Senator Rubio had it exactly right. I think our side says this is exactly what I think most Americans say. This is exactly what the president was doing. You would think after, like I said, a few years of following this president, you would understand sort of how this guy communicates. I think that's what he's doing.
You're still not answering the question. If the president is asking China to investigate, which he did right there, is that appropriate? Is that an abuse of power, or is that appropriate?
I think when the president is, and this is why it relates to Ukraine, I think when the president is trying to make sure that there is not corruption, that if we're going to be sending the hard-earned tax dollars of the American people to Ukraine to help them fight Russia, to help them get their country moving in the direction they need, to get the security assistance they need, I think he believes that we should make sure there's not corruption there. It's not President Trump's fault that Joe Biden's son was hired by a company that Mr. Volker told us this Thursday when we had him in for the interview, the ambassador, the special envoy to Ukraine. It's not President Trump's fault that Joe Biden's son was hired by Burisma, this company that had a long history of corruption. I think the president, when he's trying to decide how American tax dollars are going to be spent and what countries they're actually going to go to, it's his job to make sure there's not corruption. So when the vice president's son is hired by this company that Mr. Volker told us had a long history of corruption, was linked to the government in Ukraine, I think that's the president doing his job.
So you think it was appropriate for the president to ask Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden? Do you know of any other instances where the president has called on foreign leaders to investigate corruption that did not involve one of his political rivals?
George, we heard from the ambassador for hours this Thursday, and the ambassador told us there was no quid pro quo, there was no linkage between any type of security assistance money and any type of investigation. The ambassador was clear. We have the transcript where there is no quid. Even Democrat chairman said after reading the transcript, even though before they got the transcript, they said there's going to be a quid pro quo in
there. Okay, we don't need to hear the rest of his story. I have very little doubt that he's lying in characterizing that behind the closed door testimony from Volker. We've seen yesterday, Friday, I read all the text messages back and forth. That's all we need. But Jim Jordan, and kudos to him. George Stephanopoulos let him repeat his fictional little thing over and over and over again. That's how you do it, folks. That's why he goes on to say, why would you go on and embarrass yourself? Like, oh, the president's just saying that stuff. It's just like a bank shot. But let me reiterate this thing. But if that's the reason why Donald Trump supposedly called because of Burisma he was concerned about with Hunter Biden. Notice he didn't say anything about Joe Biden. What happened to what Jim Jordan was on about with Jake Tapper just a couple of days earlier, that there was a whole nother conspiracy involving the 2016 election?
Of things you really think the American people are like, wait a minute, so Rudy Giuliani, the president's private lawyer, had a conversation
I think that you came here and leveled a bunch of accusations and allegations about Hunter Biden.
I didn't level. I just said the facts. Did he get paid $50,000 a month?
He was paid by a foreign company. Yeah, he was paid by Burisma. But Joe Biden was trying to get a prosecutor who was not pursuing corruption fired, and it was supported.
It's amazing the gymnastics you guys will go through to defend what you really
Sir,
think
it's not gymnastics, it's facts.
The vice president.
And I would think somebody who's been accused of things in the last year or two would be more sensitive about throwing out wild allegations against people.
I'm not throwing out wild. I'm throwing out the facts.
The prosecutor was not pursuing corruption. That's why the entire West wanted him fired, including anti-corruption activists in Ukraine. I don't understand what you don't get about that.
Well, now he goes on after that. Now you get he goes on after that to talk about a complete conspiracy theory involving the Bidens. But there it is. I mean, there's Jim Jordan. He's doing his job.
He's doing a good job at it. I gotta say, if I didn't have background on any of this stuff, I would believe him in both of these clips.
He's getting that message across. The rest of the stuff is just sort of a crosstalk. The media still has not figured out how to deal with people who come on who are just lying. They just haven't figured out. And that's a problem.
And it is
1,500, incidentally. I should just say 1,500 was the number. So Jim Jordan, I guess maybe Jim Jordan just never takes anybody seriously when they say something to him.
It's just like, hey, obviously when you say go investigate something, everybody knows that that's nonsense.
It's a joke.
Oh,
it's a joke. When people come to me,
you're doing a bit.
Students come to me and say, "There's a guy who's molesting people." It's obvious. It's not serious.
There's a lot of humor on wrestling teams.
Yeah,
you don't know about that. The kids are testing bits out all the time.
It's like that early 2000s, like Vice level irony, where you say something offensive or just like something that's supposed to be factual and the people are like, that's offensive, or they're like, that's not true. And then you're like, ha ha, joke's on you. I was joking.
Exactly. I mean, that's what the right's been doing for a long time. Folks, this is no joke. Let's get to this Scaramucci thing. Look, I know I've been critical of, what's his first name? Anthony Scaramucci, because it's, quite clear that after 2.5 years, he realized he was not getting back into the White House and said, well, how can I keep this celebrity train going? I know I will now become a never Trumper, another wonderful never Trumper. And personally, I don't think he deserves the time of day, or at least I didn't think he deserved the time of day.
I don't know about that, dude.
Because Scaramucci, if he knows nothing else, he knows how to butter a guy up. And I don't know if he's fishing around for an interview on the show or what. I think we got pitched him a while back. But this goes a long way.
Let's do it.
Here is Anthony Scaramucci basically calling out Steven Crowder again. I can't believe it.
Good morning and happy Sunday. This is a message for Cold Feet Crowder.
Pause it for 1 second. Let's go back to the beginning. I just want to say, for him to take time during his Sunday, he's obviously going out for a Sunday drive. You'll see in the video with his wife. And she's great. The both of them were great. But I just want to say that
they really are.
I just want to say that's that I appreciate that. Noted. Just noted. Sunday.
He did the research.
Yeah.
Good morning and happy Sunday. This is a message for Cold Feet Crowder. And I got booked by Cinco Sanders. Okay, so listen up, Steven. Quit being a pussy and debate Sam. If you got to ask Daddy for permission, it is what it is. I know Sam ain't no teenager, but you got to man up and do the right thing. Don't be a hack and a coward, Crowder. Debate Sam. The alpha males. The alpha males are back.
That is ridiculous. Men are ridiculous.
Okay, you hear my wife? My wife just said men are ridiculous, okay? Man up. Man up and debate the guy, okay?
It's true. I mean, it's true. I don't like it. I listen.
You got to ask your dad. It is what it is. Come
right.
on.
Listen. I, of course, being a soy boy, would have appreciated it be a little bit less gendered. Not just man up, but person up. But whatever. Anthony's going to deliver it in the way that he's going to deliver it. And so there you have it.
You got to ask your dad.
His heart was in the right place.
You got to ask your dad. It is what it is. That is for the ages.
Did I send you the clip of that thing? Gosh darn it. I noticed this, and I got to tell you. Oh, it's in the Slack. See if you can pull that up. It is an image. And I just want to say, look, this is not here. I'll put it right in here too. Oh wait, that's not it. Sorry, that's a different one. Here it is. This is in regards to Crowder. I noticed this. Now, I don't know if somebody sent me this or if it came up on some type of feed or something, but pull this up. Apparently, there is a thing called, I just put it into the chat. There's a thing called, I don't know what they call this. It's some type of trend thing. Here it is, yeah. And it's gives tweet engagement stats. And here's the tweet that Steven Crowder did. Join us tonight, 8 p.m., 7 p.m. for the LWC live stream with Pinterest whistleblower Eric Cochran. I don't know what that means. And half-Asian lawyer Bill Richmond. Good stuff. Very funny. This was on October 3rd. And there was these tweet engagement stats, and this I found pretty funny. The top hashtags in this tweet were 40% was the plurality, was Cold Feet Crowder. And then the top words, 33% debate, 20% Seder. Let's see if there was any more top words. Oh, that's it. Okay, sorry. So,
can we watch the Scaramucci thing again?
Let's just watch the Scaramucci one more time. We're having fun here, folks.
Good morning and happy Sunday. This is a message for Cold Feet Crowder. And I got booked by Cinco Sanders. Okay, so listen up, Steven. Quit being a pussy and debate Sam. If you got to ask Daddy for permission, it is what it is. I know Sam ain't no teenager, but you got to man up and do the right thing. Don't be a hack and a coward, Crowder. Debate Sam. The alpha males. The alpha males are back.
Oh, yeah. We're back, baby. We are back. The alpha males are back.
I know when he first got on the Trump is unstable, needs to be removed from office train, we were all like, this is such a cynical play by a cynical person. But now
I think he's a genuine play by a genuine guy.
Yeah, it's coming up. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 978 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, it's Matt from Mass. What's going on?
Matt from Mass. What's on your mind, Matt?
Not much. I just wanted to call back, see how you guys are doing. I wanted to tell Sam, so I am a libertarian, but I'm a libertarian socialist. I just wanted to let you know that kind of that thought exists out there, that there are libertarians and they can be saved. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I am aware. I am aware of the libertarian socialists. So what does that mean? You no central government? Is that it?
Well, I mean, like, I think like conversations about that are like a little bit preemptive, but basically, yeah, like decentralized, localized, direct democracy between confederated, like small states, you know, like maybe towns or cities, and they kind of come together. And it's just like a very bottom-up structure instead of a top-down structure.
Right.
And it's just an emphasis on, you know, local cooperation and freedom, you know?
Yeah. What and what's the point of that? What do you think you get out of that you don't get now?
Well, I think it's just like a lot of like more equality, you know what I mean? And it's just like everyone working together towards a common goal. And
so like
I think
when we look at some place like Ferguson, for instance.
Yep.
The locality there now, under the Obama administration, the police force was under a DOJ order that was taken off when Jeff Sessions came in. What do you do about a situation like that, where actually the same dynamics that you have on any other level take place there, but are actually much harder to dislodge?
You're talking about like racial resentment between two different types of groups in the same community? Or?
I mean, you could do racial resentment. You could do corruption. I mean, I don't know where in Mass you live, but if you live in Whitensville, you probably know that the level of corruption there, if you're an insider in Whitensville, is higher than it would be even on the state level.
Right. No, yeah, and I think a lot of, I mean, like, it's not about a direct transitory, just like right from here, like from the situation we are now to an idealist of sort of like, you know, a communist or any sort of like extreme far leftist society. I mean, obviously there's a lot of progress that we have to make. And I think a lot of people, especially socially, you know what I mean? And the reason I kind of called in was because I think your guest kind of had it right, where I think a lot of what like divides us is artificial. And if we can like come to get like, if like mutual cooperation is honestly the most efficient way and the best way for everyone. And I think a lot of data backs that up. And especially like when you think about corruption and any sort of like racial resentment or things like that. I think it's driven more by like a personal sort of, like, a lot of those people need justifications for the way that they think or they do. And if we can break through those, that would lead to a better, it's like a better society for everyone. So, I mean, I think especially corruption and, societal discord are mostly due to the things that divide us. And that before we would transition to some sort of like idealist or sort of society, those are the conversations that we need to have. So
Yeah,
it's like,
I agree with you
you'd have
totally.
to deal with those problems first.
Yeah, I mean, the only problem I have with what you're saying is that I don't know what the magic elixir is going to be to make people people better. I mean, if and I think this is if the idea of full-on socialism or even communism is that you cannot allow any of the any capitalism to exist, because eventually its will to power is such that it will those embers will catch fire and will eventually subsume the common benefit.
Well, it's not just that, though. Like economic crises are endemic to capitalism, and they're going to keep happening as long as we have it.
Well, I mean, I think it's possible economic crises might be, part of everything, but any type of system that you have, but maybe not. But
if we
nevertheless,
destroy the economy.
But nevertheless, if the idea is that a little bit of capitalism can be bad, in the context of a society because it can come roaring back in terms of power, I would just suggest that capitalism does not exist floating around, that it is an idea that is born out of some people who want to exert their will, and they will do that in any context, and that it's pretty easy to have local communities go sideways, and if you don't provide any type of state counterbalance to it, I mean, broader, in our instance, federal counterbalance, I think there are times where it's a problem. I mean, slavery. And now, granted, slavery, I know, was certainly maybe not fully a product of capitalism, but certainly capitalism was the fuel that drove that. But there was also, a mentality. I'm not saying that in this day and age we have slavery, but the idea of like, we're going to oppress certain people in our smaller societies or our smaller localities, and just like I just have witnessed it living in a small rural town, man. It's like just even the people you see a decent amount of sort of small scale corruption, but it's
people helping people.
I mean, look.
Just not to press you, dude, but legitimate question. As a libertarian socialist, how are you not calling in about Rojava? What's up with that?
I guess I don't know much about that. I mean, I'm not like
actually not to
super,
be, but actually read about it because it will give you some concrete examples of what you're interested in.
Oh yeah, it's
definitely.
And by the way, it's totally fair to say I don't know enough about this to comment on it. I feel like more people should say that. But I think what our caller was saying was that libertarian socialism is not an ideology that can be applied in a vacuum. And sometimes in order to move us towards a libertarian socialist horizon, whatever you want to call it, it will involve moving through a phase of more government and more state power. Like, we know that right-wing libertarians are our enemies. We know that these quote-unquote small government conservatives are our enemies. I would prefer social democracy to that. Certainly everyone would on this show. And that involves a certain amount of greater state intervention. So you have to apply it in a smart way on a case-by-case basis, looking at the conditions on the ground. But another society that I think is a really good example of libertarian socialism in action are the Zapatistas in Chiapas. And I actually went to go visit them in a town called Oventique, where they let outsiders come, and I learned a little bit about their society and their mode of governance, which is basically a libertarian socialist society. The towns that are controlled by zapatistas are kind of federated together, and they have these councils. Usually the terms on the councils are very short. People are selected not any standardized way. They can volunteer, or people can volunteer them, and they make all the decisions in accordance with these assemblies of townspeople. And like you can say, yeah, the people in Chiapas are culturally and ethnically homogenous, and this could never scale up. This could never work for a big, diverse place like the U.S. And, you know, you partly have a point there. There are challenges involved. There's all kinds of bourgeois ideologies that divide people from one another, like racism, sexism, homophobia, et cetera, et cetera. But I really think that we're going to have to overcome them if we ever want to win and create some kind of better world for ourselves.
Appreciate the call. Mark Monkey TV on the IM. Two things. Who do I have to do sexual favors to get you to talk about Jimmy Dore being paid to do pro-Assad propaganda? Two, I think Scaramucci's the first one to be 100% honest and know who he's talking about. That's actually, I get the sense about the number two. I have a feeling that's possible. Yeah,
definitely.
He knew that it was about Crowder.
Definitely.
I don't know that Jimmy Dore got paid to do pro-Assad propaganda. I think that he stumbled on something and got rewards from it and then just continued to do it. That's probably my guess. I think that I just don't think that somebody just stepped up and sent, because why wouldn't we have gotten offered to get to do that? I think it's just that, do I think he should have disclosed it? Yes. But look, I think the key thing about Jimmy to understand is that in some areas, he's a smart guy. In some other areas, he's not. In many areas, he doesn't spend a lot of time thinking about what he's talking about. I think too many areas that he's willing to opine about where he doesn't think about. And I think then he just follows some clicks. I think it's a fairly. BB Teach, a good recent Doug Henwood interview. Okay. Key point that pushing for impeachment is likely to empower the neoliberal moderate wing of the Democrats. What do you think? Well, conceivable, I guess. I'm not sure exactly how that's the case. With an interesting story in The Guardian about how impeachment has basically destroyed Bibi Netanyahu's plan of isolating Iran. I think same with Saudi Arabia. They are now sitting down and having negotiations because they realize that Donald Trump is beleaguered and cannot help them and is completely erratic.
Hararetz.
And I think to a certain extent, is it? I didn't hear about it. I have a suspicion as to what his argument would be, but I don't know it, so I don't want to characterize it. But my argument was that to a certain extent, Donald Trump was always going to empower the neoliberal moderate wing of the Democrats, more so than having a neoliberal moderate wing of the Democrats, largely in charge, because I think that's when the left really grows in many respects, because people become disenchanted with, however you want to call it, neoliberalism's failure to deliver on what I think many people perceived as its promise. But I don't know the argument, so I wouldn't.
I guess there's the idea that
Did you hear it?
That the centrist Democrats, I'm just going off what I know from people.
Okay, so it's not necessarily, I just don't want to characterize Doug Henwood's argument if we don't know what it is, but you can.
Doug said it would delay the release of information on UFOs, which concerns him.
Oh, you know
That's
what? No,
Doug
actually,
said.
I do read a lot of Doug's posts on Facebook, and
okay.
I don't want to put words in his mouth, but there is the idea that centrist Democrats just want to run on the idea that Trump is bad, and that impeachment sort of feeds into that narrative. And also the idea that impeachment has happened before and didn't make presidents any less terrible following that. So
impeachments happened before and it didn't make presidents any less terrible.
Yeah, like the idea that we need to do it in order to set an example, or with an eye to history, that you can't just have rampant corruption or law breaking on the part of the president. It hasn't worked in practice.
I guess that's true to a certain extent. I mean, although one could say that, like, I mean, if you're talking about Clinton, I mean, I don't think anybody has lied about a deposition as to whether they've gotten a blowjob before. We've been able to do that. Johnson, I think it took us, 150 years till we had 140 years till we had another ranting lunatic in office. But if Gerald Ford does not pardon Nixon, I think there would have been a better lesson learned. I think if we were in a position to have impeached Reagan, and guys like Caspar Weinberger weren't pardoned, I mean, it's hard to prove a counterfactual, but just because holding powerful people to account in the past has not been sufficient in ending all of their actions, nefarious actions, I don't think that we should start doing that now. The idea that it's going to empower neoliberal candidates in the election against Trump, I mean, I don't think that there's significant evidence that the differential in 2018 was based upon issue sets that people ran on. I think that what 2018 showed us, that there is no price to be paid by running on more progressive issues. But I don't think that there's any evidence that running on more progressive issues necessarily helped you in those elections.
Yeah, but also I think it is possible for centrist Democrats to run on a platform of Trump is bad, impeach Trump, and the impeachment story might add fuel to that fire for them in a way that they don't have to focus on the progressive issues.
But do you know who else can run on those platforms? Progressives. And they can win.
So maybe it's a net.
Yeah. I mean, I think the idea at the end of the day is, I think there's something to the idea that campaigns are teachable moments in some instances. But I think particularly when you're talking about, like, the House and the Senate, I would trade an AOC type who gets in based on saying that Trump is bad. And I don't think anybody's going to win on just saying that. But just if I stipulate that that's what I would trade that over, someone who's going to lose by trying to run just on issues and ignore the fact that Trump is bad.
Oh, I'm looking at Doug's Facebook right now, actually. There's also the fear, I think it's fair to say, that the impeachment inquiry could really fall into the hands of the national security Democrats and just add a lot of fuel and a lot of attention to the idea that national security and the security state is the most important thing for Democrats to be focusing on.
I guess that's why we on the left got to own it, so that we can actually influence that outcome rather than boo and hiss on the sideline.
Yeah, and I think the people who have been calling for impeachment the most and most loudly and consistently are people like Rashida Tlaib, who came in on day one and said, I'm going to curse and impeach this guy.
Right.
Al Green. And
though there is an
Omar
effort to marginalize those voices.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we saw the
so
video.
That's why the left can't
that feeds your point.
Abandon impeachment.
I do think there's a little bit of contrarianism at play.
What?
That doesn't always
with Henwood. I'm joking.
I mean, I can see it from both sides.
Brother from Brooklyn, why no Politicon this year? It was a whole host of things. There was nobody interesting there for me on some level, and just October is just a mess. I would have had to gone directly from Vegas.
Knowing what we know now, it's kind of a blessing.
Is it a crap
I mean,
show?
the scheduling, like, no, for you.
Oh, yes. That would be also very difficult. If it goes back to L.A., I might do it, but I didn't want to go down to Tennessee for Politicon.
Sam's a coastal guy. He likes bodies of water.
If I go to Tennessee, if I go to Memphis, I want to go to Memphis. I don't want it to be in the context of around a lot of people. No.
Well, it's Nashville, but...
Nashville. Was it in Nashville?
Yeah, it's in Nashville this year.
I mean, I wouldn't want to go to Nashville that way either. Joe from Connecticut. The Majority Report's self-labeled co-host, Michael Brooks, went on Richard Wolff's show. They had a great conversation. Everyone should check it out. I know. Colin from Nebraska. Hey, crew. I posted union materials concerning town halls to discuss wage increases and future contract talks. But I also wanted to post a question about the union fighting for a 4-day week with a picture of Nixon with his 1956 quote about inevitability on the 4-day work week. Good idea? Bad idea? Should I replace Nixon's face with Michael or Sam's face? Sure. Go for it. Waterboat from Kashmir. Update on Kashmir. There is a depth article in Caravan India about, and there's an in-depth article in Caravan India about how Indian security forces in Kashmir repeatedly violently rape prisoners even if they are detained for a few days. This article was from last year. These sadistic monsters now have 13,000 boys, not including men. Just let this sink in. Ugh. As this goes, Kashmiris in Pakistan won't care about the government pleas of letting diplomacy work. Even if you don't care about Kashmir, I assure you, even a limited nuclear exchange will have devastating consequences for humanity. Watch the interview with Daniel Ellsberg, where he describes his work with nuclear war planning. You could listen to ours that we did with Daniel Ellsberg on that very topic. Kelly's dog, woof. Thanks a lot, Sam. Due to my embark test, I now have to apologize to the dogs at the park for claiming I had wolf ancestry. It's been a part of my litter's lore, but regardless of the DNA, I was never treated as wolf, and I should never have attempted to appropriate wolf culture. Thanks for taking my IM. The Shapiro Gambit. Morning regressives. I just want to look at the facts. Just the long, hard evidence of the matter. Okay. Juliak. Hey, could you point me to the right direction to donate or help the GM strikers? I think if you Google GM Strike Fund, you will find it. Last Prussian, 2020 Trump-Pence versus Ruben Dorr. Who do you vote for? TMBS, Literary Hanger, and the Antifada are amazing. Majority Report is okay, too. Thank you very much. That's very sweet. Space Lennon. Hi, I'm a high school teacher and union organizer in Puget Sound area in Washington. I'd like to know your opinions, particularly Jamie's, with regard to the need to change educational funding and policy making for the purpose of equity with regard to race and class. Jamie, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, yeah, we got to fund education equally for everyone, whether they live in a rich place or a poor place. But also, like, you can only do so much at school if kids don't have proper nutrition, if they don't have secure housing, if they have to move around a lot and keep changing schools. So we really, in addition to funding education properly, we really need these broad redistributive measures like housing guarantees and nutrition assistance that just barely exist in this country right now.
Yes, I would agree. We need to decouple. Another reason why we need the federal government, at least at this moment, to decouple
property taxes.
Education funding from property taxes. But yes, every educator I've ever interviewed on the show, almost every single one, is every educator says, tell me what the median income is in that district, and I will tell you the quality of the school. It's an interesting book out. We may have him on. It was a charter supporter who ends up conceding that even in those schools that overperform charters, it is a function of a self-selecting process of parents who are deeply involved in their kids' education, which means that they, more often than not, probably have some mechanism that is helping them in terms of support that may not be available to other parents. And at the end of the day, you need to do all the things that Jamie was talking about. You cannot have schools taking care of societal problems that are outside their purview. And when the kid shows up, you need to have kids who can show up prepared to learn and free of a whole host of burdens that would prevent them from learning. That's just the bottom line.
Oh, and if you want to talk about race, too, and the privatization of education, the statistics on charter schools are actually really, really bad, especially with regards to racial disparities in the way that kids are punished.
Without a doubt. All the charter schools that are in inner cities have like these incredibly rigid. I mean, some of the parents want that on some level, but it's just problematic from a myriad of different ways. Speaking of redistribution, here's an interesting graph from the New York Times. This is actually a GIF that actually has a dynamic. It's like animated. And here it is. This is the overall tax rate on the richest 400 households was only 23%. Their combined tax payments equaled less than 1/4 of their total income. That's stunning. The overall rate was 70% in 1950 and 47% in 1980. This is, you can see it. I mean, this is a stunning graphic. It just keeps dropping and dropping and dropping to where the total tax rate for the top 400 is actually below the people at the 30th percentile. In fact, it's below everybody. Just play that one more time. It is amazing. This is all you really need to know about what has happened in society. I mean, if there was ever one graph, it's just nuts.
Yep. The more money they have, the more power they have, the more money they have.
And that's how you have, I mean, it's not the only thing that contributes to the massive wealth inequality, but there are a couple of things, maybe more than a couple, but that is a pretty big one. Pretty big one. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 216 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 216. Going once. 216. Going twice. 216. Gone. Sorry. Sorry, 216. Calling from a 813 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello? Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello?
This is Caleb from Tampa.
Caleb from Tampa. What's on your mind, Caleb?
Hey, I was really curious. This is the first time calling. I really appreciate everything y'all do. But
thanks.
I was really curious what y'all thought about the Democratic race. Here in Tampa and around the area, around Brandon, Lithia, mostly everyone around here, as far as I can tell, supports Trump like 100%. And they're not really paying attention to any of this Ukraine stuff or any of that. But most of my friends and the people that I talk to and I socialize with, we all really like are for Bernie. But none of my friends, I'm probably the most political person among them, and I'm really paying attention to everything going on, but they don't pay attention at all. And they've already made up their mind of who they're voting for because last election they already voted for Bernie. So I feel like all the stuff on TV and everything that they want to talk about and push for about Bernie's numbers being low and Biden's and all that, I feel like all that's just inflated, of course.
I mean, I think it's dangerous to generalize from your own experience in that way. In my experience, that type of generalizing is rarely accurate. I think the big question that I think keeps coming up is, to what extent is Bernie's support a little bit subterranean? In other words, they've been doing a tremendous amount of organizing. we see indications, right? Like number of donors, number of volunteers through the roof, frankly. And, you know, and I think that can be, in certain contexts, that can be misleading. I went up to New Hampshire in 2008, 2007 for the Republican primary. And if you were to walk around Manchester, New Hampshire, you would assume that Ron Paul was going to win the New Hampshire primary, because literally everywhere you went, you saw a Ron Paul sign, you saw a Ron Paul, you know, somebody, a Ron Paul supporter. They were all out in droves. And then it turns out that the relationship between Ron Paul supporters and people who vote for him, I mean, who are out on the streets and people who vote for him, was basically 1-to-1. Like, the algorithm was, for every Ron Paul supporter you see on the street, he will get one vote. And then all of a sudden he comes in like fourth or something. You don't know. You just don't know. And so I think all you can do is organize, do phone banking, and contribute in whatever way you can. And then we'll see what happens in Iowa and New Hampshire. And we'll get a really strong sense of whether, you know, that sense that people have that maybe his support is being undercounted in some fashion is the case. So, you know, we'll see.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for the call, Caleb. Calling from a 515 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Okay, I am so excited. Hi, my name's Laura. I'm from Southeast Iowa.
Laura, Southeast Iowa. Welcome to the show.
Sorry, thank you. It's Shauna Laura is the full name.
Shauna Laura?
Shauna Laura, like Shauna Lulu.
Oh, like Shauna Lulu, of course. Right, Shauna Laura.
Shauna Laura, like Shauna Lulu. Anyhow, that's not why I called.
Oh.
So I have this whole, I'm a huge fan. I listen pretty much every day now for the past like year.
Okay.
And like 3 years ago, I had no interest, no knowledge about politics at all. And now I'm a Bernie volunteer. I phone bank every week, and I try to get out canvassing once a week if I can. And I just really, really appreciate everything I learned from y'all. And I don't know if Michael is still there, but I came to his show in Chicago, and it was really inspiring and awesome.
How did you find our show?
So I was a single parent for a long time, and me and my daughter kind of just started watching the primaries in 2015, and just kind of like as entertainment, honestly. And of course, like everyone else, we just, watched the buffoon rise. And then, honestly, I started getting more, we watch on YouTube, and started getting more Pac-Man videos showing up. Listen to him. I still listen to him, but you guys became my regular after a while.
That's good to hear.
Sounds right.
And yeah. So here's one example of how people don't really understand how, government affects them. Through my 20s, being a single parent, I had all kinds of health problems, mental health problems, didn't have insurance. In my 30s, I suddenly qualified for health insurance. And it wasn't until I started educating myself, by listening to you guys, and that I learned that it was because Iowa expanded Medicaid is why, in my 30s, and luckily because I ended up having much worse health problems that, I really needed insurance for. But
so let me ask you this. Because the dynamic you've just explained, I think, is a huge failure of, it was a huge failure of the Obama administration. It was a huge failure of the nominal left at large to sort of educate people about that. How did you why do you think it was that, how does that happen? That you get Medicaid, and you don't realize at first, like, oh, this is a function of a policy decision.
Right. I mean, I single parent of a little kid in my early 20s. I wasn't prepared. I was just kind of knew that there was going to be programs out there, and just, my job, once I became that single parent when my daughter was very young, was like, okay, I got to get as much help as I can. I didn't even have time to finish college before I had my kid. And so, I'm so busy, like, trying to make ends meet and basically, in survival mode for about a decade. I met my husband a few years ago, but, and then it, that kind of shows how it's, in a way, a luxury. It's like, I'd gotten to a much more stable place that, have time to, like, pay attention to something, and, and then it shows, like, Pac-Man and you guys and Kyle Klinsky, I listen to everybody, that just make it accessible. And then I just, started really figuring out, putting two and two together. Can I just tell it? Yeah. Did you have a question?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So, can I just tell a quick funny story?
Yes.
So I am volunteering. I have a lot of anxiety, but I'm trying to get better at talking to people. So I was just feeling especially bold at the farmer's market in my little town, which I live in kind of a bizarre little town. It's where the guru to the Beatles brought his, like,
you live in the
settlement.
Maharishi's town in Iowa?
I do. It's a very interesting place. It had our county, Jefferson County, had the highest Bernie vote last time around, so that was kind of cool.
TM is good then.
But I'm sorry?
I said TM is good then. It's helping people vote for Bernie.
There's actually a really strange group in the TM movement at the top that are Trump fans because his daughter does TM. It's
of course.
Some of the really in deep cult followers are a little strange. But anyways, so I was feeling it. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time.
Go ahead. Oh, no, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Anyway, so I was feeling especially bold at our little farmer's market last week, and saw the Tulsi table. I have seen it, several weeks. Walked up and I just said, "Hey guys, who are you going to vote for when Tulsi drops out?" And the woman, she says, "Oh, we're in it. We want her to win." And then somebody tells me that it's Tulsi's parents. That I just asked that question to.
Oh.
I don't know why Tulsi's parents are in Fairfield at the farmer's market, but that's who I asked that question to.
Oh.
Nice.
Well, I hope. Hope that doesn't
stay bold.
Let me tell you this. Yes, yeah. I'll just say, like, don't let that play into your anxiety. That will never ever happen again. I promise you. You will never ever run into the parents of the candidate that you are basically saying
won't happen again.
You should abandon support,
especially like Kamala Harris, like her dad clearly not backing her.
This is not going to happen. Like, statistically speaking, you
right.
understand that you have basically met every possible anxiety you could have regarding that. You have now championed.
It's a good
You've
sign.
moved past it, and it's never going to get more awkward than that.
That's right. I did also I try to see a lot of candidates come through here because the people in this community are really politically active. And I did go see Tulsi the last time she was here, and I wore my D's Nuts 2016 shirt just for fun.
There you go.
Y'all remember D's Nuts? Yep,
yes.
Yep.
Oh yeah. No. I've,
sounds like you're getting bolder and bolder.
Appreciate the call.
I'm trying.
Great
Thank
meeting you in Chicago.
Really, thank you.
I hope we did.
Thanks.
Thanks again.
Thanks for the support, and thanks for all you're doing for Bernie. That's good. Speaking of that, D's Nuts, did you not see that thing that I sent you about the impeachment song? We can do that tomorrow. We'll do that tomorrow. Let's play this. This is very heartwarming before we go. We'll get to Stephen Moore tomorrow. We'll get to Donald Trump talking about how he's single-handedly saved Christianity. But before we do, this is so inspirational and so moving in many respects that I felt like we should probably play this just because a lot of tough news today. And
it's good to end on a high note sometimes, Sam.
We're going to have to go in a minute. Callers, we're not going to get to any more callers today. I'm going to do a little more IMs. This is
very stupid.
Just sit back and watch this preview of a very special episode of Ben Shapiro's Sunday Show.
There just really isn't a lot of compromise. So I just thought if I'm going to do this job this way, I just have to 100% not care what anybody thinks, but really not care what the left thinks. But what I have in return is so much better, because I think that I feel gratitude in the fact that I can represent so many people who are voiceless in the mainstream media.
Sunday special with Meghan McCain. There you go.
That is going to be special.
I may watch that, but I would encourage you to watch it and cut it up and tell us what clips to look at, because I don't know if I want to watch that. But I like the fact, it is so true. You so rarely hear any conservative voices in the media, like the president. Barely does he make it on the news.
The other conservative daughter of a Republican politician that you co-host a View with.
Yeah. Right.
Who you sit not as far as I am away from Michael every day.
Right. Like we have no idea what the conservatives stand for in this country. We never hear it. You never hear about it. There aren't millions of people watching Fox News or OWN or what's the other one? The WorldNet Daily, or what's
Sinclair Broadcasting Networks.
Daily
Most
Wire.
pundits on CNN, at actual fair amount on MSNBC.
Exactly.
Certainly never
all
hear from
major
billionaires.
network shows, representation, the guest lineup of Meet the Press.
I feel like we should just
Am I
guess
missing anything?
what group is she talking about, do we think? All those? All
Is
of
she
them?
complaining about the Jacobin?
The Jacobin is like taking up so much space in the Majority Report office.
Yeah.
It's like, but she's really glad. It's gratifying.
That's super. I believe it's gratifying. Although she doesn't always look like sometimes she doesn't look that gratified on that show.
She seems a little bit frustrated. Yeah. Let's read a couple IMs, and then we'll be back. Tomorrow we'll do news. We'll get to more calls. Callers, I apologize. Thank you for holding on. I appreciate your indulgence. Sam's asymmetrical nostrils. Michael, just a quick correction on your global healthcare analysis last week. Switzerland does not have governmental healthcare. Quite the opposite. We have a fully private healthcare system, and prices keep increasing every year. It's a real catastrophe. Thanks.
I miscommunicated. I thought that I'm assuming there is some public expenditure in Switzerland. That would surprise me. But I actually was saying that my understanding was that national health systems came to Switzerland later in the game after the establishment of private health industry, and that's why Switzerland is not as good as other European states.
Love the AM Quickie. Left is best. Winnipeg Craig. Justin Trudeau's government is challenging a human rights ruling that would have the government pay for discriminatory underfunding of services to children on reserves. People want justice for Indigenous communities, and the Singh upswing has begun. Jagmeet's personal approval numbers are trending up quickly, and now he's the only leader above water. Pending a good performance in the first official debate tonight, I think we'll see some major moves towards the NDP. Good luck. Gregory from Oklahoma. Sam, you need to run for Senate so you can primary Chuck Schumer. If you run, I'll move to New York and work as a paid staffer for your campaign. I'm not even kidding. I'll work every day for your campaign. Please run. Well, I appreciate it. You'll be
just alphaed his way into a job.
You'll be one of the first hires I have. I'm not gonna say that you're gonna be the first hire, but I will say that you may be one of the possibly. We'll see. Leaf Sage, following the advice of a previous caller, I started phone banking for Bernie Sanders. I can confirm that nothing feels better than converting a Kamala Harris supporter from California to a voter for the only progressive candidate who matters. If you have time, I definitely encourage you to volunteer as well. Can I get a shofar? You can indeed. Feet pics. The interview today makes it more clear why the Joe Rogan interviews with Cornel West and Bernie went so well. Emma. Yes, good point. Last week, you reported on someone who claimed you can't tax wealth because most wealth isn't liquid. This was a, who is it? Was it Tim Pool?
Tweet.
Yeah. The easiest debunking of that stupid argument is that we do it all the time in the U.S. It's called property tax. That's true. We also tax cars. I mean, sales tax on stuff is necessarily not liquid, right? I mean, you've just bought something. Property tax, indeed. You don't sell your house every time, and we make an assessment. Home or land has, and if you don't like it, if you don't, they take away your non-liquid house away. Same solution. You can pay the tax on your own non-liquid health. The state takes it away. Problem solved. Congressional Baseball Phantom. Hello, Sam. I'm wondering if the forthcoming joke explanation glossary is going to have a section that details the meaning behind certain IMer names. Asking for a friend. Always. Anyways, Happy New Year and play ball. Look, if you have any question in regarding that, all you got to do is send an email to majorityreporters@gmail.com, write in the subject memes, and if there's some, I don't know what all the IRM is about, but put the name in there, and then we're going to put it back out to the community, and that's how it's going to answer.
Although it's going to be on its own email address.
No.
No?
The email address will automatically forward it to that email address.
Oh.
Yeah, man.
This is news to me.
Oh, good. Stone Zebra 666. Hey, Sam, what's your favorite bagel in New York City? Will you have Sarah Silverman on the show, please? It's possible that Sarah could come on soon. It's possible. She's in town. My favorite bagel is now a place like on 12th Street in Brooklyn, 12th Street and 7th Ave. Bagel Hole, I think it is. Bagel Hole. It's a good bagel. They boil it like the old school bagels. None of this like baking stuff. The Shape of Pickles. Is there an older Beto article on USA Today that describes Beto's first-person fictional story that he wrote as a teenager about mowing children down with his car? He describes it as an act of love and pure ecstasy. He contemplates and celebrates how they would sound. What? Please tell Jamie to lock the basement door.
Oh, my.
That is weird. All right, 3 more of those. The Chris Lopaco. Can I get a shofar for finishing the Twin Cities Marathon yesterday, wearing an I Stand with Ilan shirt? Have you done a segment about Crowder posting filtered YouTube search results to make it look like conservatives are being censored? If not, please do. We'll look into that. Thank you. The Chris Lopaco. Congratulations. Colorado guy. First, Michael sounds super sultry today. Second, if you want someone to volunteer their time for you, cast their vote for you, then what you have to do is convincingly demonstrate that you give a damn about them, that you know what you're fighting for. The biggest reason Dems lost in 2016 isn't because Trump is that slick or the Russians were that effective. It's because the majority of the country is desperate for a political ally. I knew it didn't have in Hillary. That's why Bernie will win in 2020. Blocked by Dave Rubin. Sam, you talked a bit about last week about working on Spin City. Just wondering if you have any other stories about working with Michael J. Fox. No. Philadelphia girlfriend, he was very nice, though. He's a nice guy. Have any of the Republicans who said that Trump was just joking about having China investigate Biden explained how China would know he's joking? The Chinese, very on top of that.
Very, very advanced sense of humor.
Ted Cruz, buttery cow. Sounds like Jim Crow era hasn't quite ended. Champagne communist. Oh, yo, just saying hi, hello. And the final IM of the day. Talking about reparations, we need to talk about how no package will be complete without a 25 to 50-year structural disenfranchisement of the white vote. I'll be even generous, allow white people to run for office, but we need to end white suffrage to really let this nation heal. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know